Hello and welcome to another episode of Trash to Track. In this episode we're going to be looking at this Tri-Ang Dock Shunter that belongs to David, whose King we serviced in the last video. Now David tells me that this was his father's, and judging by the couplings on it, this dates from the late 50s, early 60s. A battery test on this model proves that it is a complete non-runner. The screw is missing that skewers the body shell, and the body shell is quite damaged, so I'm going to look for a replacement. Now when I took the body shell off, it becomes apparent why this model wouldn't run. The insulating sleeve has slid up and is exposing both brushes to the same polarity of power, so it would have caused a short circuit. So refitting that sleeve onto the correct brush and applying power with a battery still proves fruitless, and this dock shunter is refusing to move. So elevating it up, I put power directly to the brush terminals and still nothing. So I think, right, it might be the battery, it's only 9 volts. So I hook up the leads from my controller with the crocodile clips and see if that gives it the boost it needs, but still to no avail. There is no power going to this motor whatsoever. So it looks like I'm going to have to strip this down completely and give it a thorough refurbishment, and fingers crossed we can get this model back into running order. So the first thing I'm going to do is remove this screw here, which removes this Formica board where the light used to be, and it reveals this myriad of old wiring, but I'm going to try and keep that intact if I can. I'm also going to have to remove the base keeper plate and strip this model down almost to its component pieces, I think, because it does, by the look of it, it needs a blooming good clean. When I remove this base keeper, the amount of dirt on this becomes apparent, and I'm not surprised it wasn't running. This has got 60 years of gunk left on it. I mean, you watch this cotton bud, and bearing in mind that is just from one wheel arch. This model is extremely dirty. There is 60 years worth of crud built up on this model, and I have got no doubt that this has not been serviced. If ever, it hasn't been serviced for a very, very long time. Now just look at that. That is proper manky. So gently feeding the wires through. Like I said, I'm going to strip this down to its component parts, and I'm going to have to give this a thorough clean. Now, you remove this nut here. The magnet appears to be relatively strong, although I may give it a blast in the remagnetizer. And removing that screw, or bolt, whatever you want to call it, allows me to take this cap piece off. I can then remove the magnet from the pole pieces, and then the brush retainer comes out. Now I couldn't work out how to get the armature out, so I'm just going to gently lever this keeper plate up off the end, which holds a bearing, and the oil pad. There is the bearing. Do not lose those, whatever you do. So that was in the magnetic tray, so it didn't go anywhere. The oil pad was removed, and then the armature and commutator were gently pulled away, and then the 2 magnet pole pieces there also fell away. So now it is stripped in its entirety, and this is proper manky. This is horrendously dirty. It really was. Now you'll just see, look at it, it literally scrapes off, and I spent ages trying to clean all this, and every time you thought you'd done it, you found another patch where there was a thick layer of grime. So I'm just going to speed the footage up of me trying to clean this. Now, unfortunately, David also sent me a Tri-Ang Princess, which I didn't film because I've done one of those before. That was also dirty, as dirty, if not more so than this, and I regret not filming that. Now, there is a ball bearing in the other end there. That is stuck fast, that won't come out, so I tapped it there to make sure it was sitting tight, which it is. And again, I'm still finding massive clumps of dirt on this model. This dirt is either from extensive running over the past 60 years and an accumulation of being in storage. Now the armature and commutator don't look too bad. There is a lot of fibre wrapped around the shaft, which I removed with these tweezers. And then I cleaned the commutator faceplate with my usual method of a cotton bud methylated spirits. I then get the old toothbrush out to remove all the dirt and crud that is in the gears, in the teeth of the worm gear rather, That was built up quite nastily. That was removed, and I apologise for the dodgy footage. My camera stand was facing the wrong way, but then you can't really see it. But I polish up the commutator with a fiberglass pencil, clean out the gaps in the commutator between the brass parts with a toothpick, and then polish it up again with a cotton bud and mess, and it came up really nice. So you can see there just how much crud is in between those plates. That is not good for the motor when it's running. It can cause short circuits and lead to very poor running indeed. So now that's all cleaned up and the coils look good, I'm going to also clean out the parts in the motor, the pole pieces here, which where the armature spins. These were also very dirty. In fact, everything apart from the body shell on this model was caked in a layer of black grime. So I've cleaned off as much as I think I can, so I now put the bogie frame here on a piece of toweling and give it a liberal coating of contact cleaner, just to get rid of any lingering grease and dirt that I may have missed. And as you'll see in a minute, I did miss some, even though I'd worked on this from what I thought was every conceivable angle. But no, it was still coming off, the dirt on this model. You can see that on them cotton buds, it is still coming off in droves, even though I'd been working on this, getting the dirt off here for the best part of about 40 minutes at this point. So it was out with the old toothbrush again, and I gave it a good rubbing over while the contact cleaner was still there before it had evaporated, just to get into every crevice, nook and cranny. I wanted this model to be crystal clean when it goes back to David. Now the base keeper, this is, I mean, look at this. I can scrape the dirt off this with a scalpel. It was everywhere. It was on my fingers. It took ages to get it out of my skin. I should have worn gloves really, but it was proper dirty. It's like it was hard to explain. It's like a sandy paste really. And now it turned my attention to cleaning the wheels. Now these obviously are as dirty as everything else because they've been sat inside that bogie frame spinning away. And I did my best with a cotton bud of methylated spirits, but in the end I resorted to using the Dremel and a brass brush. But before I did that, I got the toothbrush again just to clean all the teeth in these drive gears. Now I don't usually advocate using a Dremel or any power tool and a brush to clean wheels because it can, and has in the past, removed the nickel plating off modern day wheels. But these wheels from the early Tri-Ang Rovex period are steel. See, look, the muck is still coming off this model. But anyway, as I was saying, they're made of steel, so burnishing them up with a brass brush will not damage them and it won't take any plating off them. If you did this to modern wheels, from say a brand new or a newish, as in 20-year-old Hornby A4, it can bring the nickel plating off the wheels, so I do not recommend doing it. But on these older models it's fine. So I do clean them all up. I polish and burnish all the wheels up so they are clean. And after I do this, I do give them another wipe with a cotton bud and meth just to remove any last pieces of grease. And you can see there just how clean they've come up. So now I am happy that this is degreased and decrudded, if that's even a word, and I'm going to start putting it back together. So I'll put a small amount of oil in the end there where that ball bearing sits, and I have the magnet and the pole pieces. Now this has the magnet in the middle has been remagnetized, and I'm now putting the armature back in. This is a little bit out of sequence because this brush holder has to go in before you put that top magnet in, as it sits there and is held in place by the top magnet, so that just simply clips in place like that. And then, as I was saying, once the armature's in, the felt pad is replaced over the end when I can get it to line up correctly. It was quite fiddly. You can see the shine I've managed to get on that commutator faceplate there. So once that's sat in its housing, the ball bearing was then pressed back into place when I can get it out of the magnetic tray, and a tiny amount of oil was put in there because everything is dry now, everything has been degreased and cleaned. There's the ball bearing, and then that clip cover was put back on, and I spin the armature to make sure it's seated correctly, which it is. The felt pads on either end were given a liberal dose of oil. This will soak into that felt pad and will last years as that motor rotates. The next thing to do is to replace the brushes. Now this clip goes in there and makes contact with that brass piece, which contacts the magnet and allows current to flow. The all-important insulating piece was then rethreaded onto that brush spring. If you remember, this was missing and moved when we took the body off. The housing part was put on and this bolt was resecured. It's got a threaded end, so it will only go in one way. Just making sure all the parts are lined up correctly there. This wiring piece was then threaded through from underneath as we did before, making sure not to break any of those 60-year-old solder joints, because I really didn't fancy a big soldering job on this model, although I do use the soldering iron shortly and you'll see why. And then a little bit of oil is placed in these bearing, if you can call them bearing houses, where the axles sit, and then the axles are put back in place. These are handed. You need to put the insulated side where the pickup part is, and then the base keeper plate was screwed back in place with the 2 brass screws we removed earlier. So once that's all done, and these brass screws, I mean, they do stand the test of time, these screws, because they don't lose any thread. Like I said, this is 60 years old. So once that was done, the brushes were replaced onto the spring, and then I get a cocktail stick and I use a very, very small amount of silicone grease on the worm. I basically rub it on and rub it into the teeth, and then remove most of it just to lubricate the metal parts. And the reason you don't want too much on this is because the armature spins, it will spread grease to the wheel backs, which will then equal poor running. So you don't want to put too much on. The light board was then screwed back in place, and with that piece of contact, the contact wire was also screwed in correctly. And now I'm going to take it over to the test track and give it a battery test to see if it runs. Now, if you remember before, that didn't turn at all under battery power. Now look at it, it is practically, when I can line the battery up, it goes in one direction, but in reverse it absolutely zooms along. But I'm pleased that it's running. All that muck and dirt after the last 60 years has been removed, has actually done it some good. Now it's missing a bulb, so what I'm going to do is I'll put the 2 pins through the holes where they should be, and I've actually soldered those in place so they don't fall out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to solder this bulb onto these pins to make a good electrical connection. Now this bulb is out of an old Helgen class 47, or that's what it was made for. I've got a few in my spares box. It's never been in a 47, but it's a 12 volt bulb, so it should work okay in this model. I'm just going to use a bit of insulation tape just to hold it onto the roof there, and push the bulb through the aperture in this newly acquired body shell that I got off a scrap model that the local model shop was selling as spares or repairs. Now unfortunately this body shell, although it is in good condition, has a later coupling on one end. So the model is going to have 2 different types of coupling, which isn't too bad, as like I said, I've sent the original body shell back to David as well, so if he wants to swap it back over, he can do. So once the bulb's in place, the wiring, and I've also replaced that wire there, that green wire, as one of the solder joints did break in the end, but that was soldered directly to the brush from the pickup to enable good electrical conductivity. And once everything's shoehorned in the body shell, I managed to get a replacement screw for the top, which was missing off David's original model. And then I'm just going to tighten this up gently. You don't want to tighten it up too much, as these body shells, the plastic is 60 years old. It's quite brittle and will snap and crack if you over tighten the screws in it. So that is the dock shunter rebuilt and thoroughly cleaned from the ground up. So let's put it on the track with a battery and let's test that light. Now the light comes on before it starts to move, and it's nice and bright, and off she goes, and she is running very well in both directions now. It's not running too well on this track, and that's because the wheel flanges are actually bumping on the chairs, but I'm just holding it in place there so you can see that light's working. Now these diesel dock shunters, I really like these compact bulky design, and I may look in the future at getting my own one and remotoring it with something more modern. But there's the rebuilt one, and there's David's dad's original body shell. So I think we've done a pretty good job on this one. I mean, it's one of the dirtiest Tri-Ang locos I've ever worked on, and it really was full of mank, as you saw. So I'm going to put it on the rolling road just to give you a good look at that new light bulb I've put in there. As I said, it runs better on the rolling road because it's not bumping upon the chairs on the track. But it's a very good solid runner now, and I hope David is pleased that he will be able to see his father's toy trains running again after so long being stored in his loft. So it's down onto the dining room table with a couple of wagons, and I'm going to let the dock shunter have a spin round now just to wear those gears in and spread the lubrication. If you've got an engine you'd like to see featured in a future episode of Trash to Track, please email me at dansmodelrailways@gmail.com. Have a look and get it sent over, and it may even feature in an episode all of its own. I hope David's happy with his father's dock shunter now back into running order. Thank you for watching Trash to Track. Please like, share and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye for now.